Grit's a term that you hear thrown around all the time. I've heard it all my life. You got to have some grit. You got to be gritty. You know, coaches, athletes, you hear it even in the business world. Oh, they got to have grit. They got to keep going. But what the hell does that really mean? Oddly enough, about a week ago, I started listening to the audiobook Grit by Angela Duckworth. And since I started listening to that book, I can't stop really thinking about it and how it's such an integral part of all of our lives. Something that I myself have found important and be able to use at times, and even at times have fallen short. And how that really could help you, or maybe something you could learn from it. Now, Angela Duckworth defines grit as passion and sustained persistence applied towards long-term achievement with no particular concern for rewards or recognition along the way. I really couldn't think of any better way to put it, and to be honest, she's done so much research on it, I think it would be a disservice not to give her definition, and I think it's excellent. And when listening to this book, like a few others, I know I'm not alone, and probably you too, will sometimes measure myself up, see where I stack up with these quote-unquote attributes, whether it's Grit by Angela Duckworth, Mindset by Carol Dweck, or Relentless by Tim Grover. I have a tendency to think about myself, think about situations that I've been in life. Where do I stack up? Did I have this attribute? Do I have this attribute? Can I get more of it? Is it something that's immutable? And short answer is you can get more grit, which is always nice. And I was thinking in terms of my own life, how would I know that I demonstrated grit after listening to a portion of the book? And one instance that always comes back to mind is right after the first semester of law school. I was off for about 5 weeks and I didn't know my grades. So obviously a little concerned, a little stressed, but you know, whatever. And it was the day I was driving back up to law school for that second semester, the spring semester, my first year. I was riding with a friend of mine. We were together and we got a notification while we were driving on the interstate. And if you're in New York, you know, it's just a long stretch of roadway that goes basically from New York City all the way up to Albany. And about half, maybe a quarter through our ride or so, we get a notification the grades are in. We stop at a rest stop, we check our grades. And I did terrible. I got some of the worst grades I've ever gotten in my life. And I'll never forget that drive from the rest stop till we got to my dorm room. And that night in my dorm room, thinking that maybe I had made a mistake. Maybe I was never meant to be in law school. Maybe it's just not for me. And I think this happens to a lot of us when we hit a setback, something that we just don't expect to happen. For me, I was never used to getting a D or a C minus or basically being in the bottom tier of a class. I thought I was doing well. I clearly was not. And I didn't have the wherewithal to know it at the time or to accept that maybe I could have done things better. And I'll never forget that night, sitting in my room by myself, trying to find answers, trying to figure out, trying to make sense of all this. And I stumbled across the last lecture by Randy Pouch on YouTube. Now, this is 2010. And I remember watching the grainy video and being inspired. And one thing he always talked about is that obstacles exist to see how much you want them. And if that's not the definition of using grit, then I don't know what is. And I vowed that night that I was not going to give up. I was going to keep going. I was going to fight forward. And I did. And I studied and I lived in that library and I gave it my all and I made it through. And I made it through because of grit. Not because I had some sort of special talent or I did something special. No, I wasn't that special. Still not. But I could work. And I did. And I'm unbelievably proud of myself for that, because I knew in that situation I could have made a choice to do something different, but I didn't. I used my grit. I could also think of another situation which I didn't use my grit. I'd wanted to go into JAG after law school. And one of the things I had to do was lose some weight and get in better shape and do this physical fitness test. And the first time I did it, I was able to pass, but I didn't pass with a very high score. And I kind of was serious, but really wasn't very serious with it. So when the second time came around, I wasn't prepared. I didn't do well. I ended up quitting after I think the first pull-up test, realizing that I was never going to make it and that I wasn't prepared for it, and that maybe it wasn't for me, and that's okay. But that was a situation in which I didn't have grit. I didn't give it my all, and I didn't potentially get the result. Regardless, I knew in my heart I wasn't there. So, after listening to this book, thinking about my own life, you're probably wondering, how the hell does this help me? Well, from somebody who at one point did have some grit and thinks in certain situations I do, as I think we all do, I've kind of distilled down some of the things that I think made it work. Why did it work in this situation and not that one? What can I glean from it? And I came up kind of with 3 principles that for me worked, and you might want to take them and see if they work for you. The first one is obsession. To me, it became the most important thing in my life. For law school, that was it. No matter what, I was going to find a way. I was going to claw and claw. I was going to ask for help from every single person, whether it was a writing class, a civics class, whether it was learning how to study better, take notes better. It didn't matter. I was asking everybody for help. There was no person that I thought I knew more than. And just that humility, just that being able to ask other people for help and realizing that you didn't have all the answers is what led me to the answers. You know, sometimes we can't get out of our own goddamn ways. Let me tell you something. When you get stripped down like that at times, you realize that you are the one in your way. And I was. And by being humble and saying, listen, I could use your help, it makes a huge difference. And you'd be amazed at things you can learn and how many people are willing to help you, because there really are a lot of good people out there. The second thing is I had a fuck it attitude. What do I mean by that? I said, fuck it, I'm going to make this happen. I don't care. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care how hard it is. I want this. With every fiber of my being, I had wanted it. And I was going to work for it, and I was going to figure it out. That meant that I opened the library, and I sat there until I couldn't read straight and would close the library or go home and just go to sleep. That's what I was going to do. And I think that if there's anything in your life that is so important that you are waking up thinking about it, that every day it comes into your mind, you have to have that fuck it attitude. You got to figure it out. Now, I'm not saying that life is easy and you can be single-minded. You can't. If you have a job, if you have kids, if you have a whole family that's depending on you, obviously you are not going to be able to spend every waking moment of your free time doing it. But there will be moments of free time that you have. Maybe when you're waking up before everyone else. Maybe it's after everybody goes to bed. Maybe it's those few minutes that you play on your phone while you're waiting for other people. Maybe take out a notebook, write down your idea. Maybe you read that book. Maybe you take that class. You listen to that book. You do whatever you can do in the time that you have to get where you want to go. Because all those little steps will build up. But if you don't do something, I can guarantee you, you won't get it. You just won't. Sadly, that's the way life is. And the last thing, and I think the most important, is I believed I could do it. I believed deep down inside I could be successful at something, that I knew that I could pass. And I think that we all kind of need that belief in ourselves. And sometimes that's so hard. It's hard when you've let yourself down before. It's hard when you've come up short. It's hard when you feel that you're not enough. But let me tell you something, you are. If there's something that you want, you can get it. If there's one thing that seems to come through on Angela Duckworth's book, is that most of the people who have achieved unbelievable levels of success were not the naturally gifted people. It was the people who kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And no matter what, they just kept persevering. In fact, actually, it's most of the people who weren't very good at something that made the biggest impact, which is unbelievable when you think about it. Because how many times do we think, oh, this person must be a natural, it must become so easy to them? Unfortunately, that's not always the case. It's usually not. So have some grit. Go for it. You want something, you got to work for it, but you can get it. I believe in you. So why the hell don't you believe in you? That's the question you should answer. Have a little grit.